Welcome back to another video. Today I'm reviewing Legend of the Galactic Heroes, an anime that has the reputation of being the in-game of anime, the pinnacle of storytelling for the entire medium, but it can be a bit intimidating when you consider that this is from the 80s and it is a series which spans 3 movies and 110 episodes, plus it's only sub. This is a story where you really need to pay attention to all of the fine details here, but then again, it's so long that if you miss any, you're probably not going to rewatch it. So is this anime truly the catalyst for your enlightenment? Let's find out. Legend of the Galactic Heroes is set within our very own universe, but in the distant future, in the 36th century. Here, humanity has stretched their space legs across the Milky Way galaxy, but of course, as human nature would dictate, they didn't do it all as one single unified force. There was corruption, which led to rebellion and eventually war. Here we begin the saga of this monumental war between the Democratic Free Planets Alliance and the monarchy of the Galactic Empire. This story follows an expansive cast of characters. I'm talking like 50 people here. At the brunt of this crowd, we have our 2 main protagonists, that is Yang Wen-li and Reinhard von Lohengram. Yang begins as an officer for the Free Planets Alliance. He's a peace-loving history enthusiast with strong Republican values. Due to his vast knowledge of history, Yang finds himself with a natural skill for strategy. Although his personal goal is to retire as soon as possible and live a peaceful, relaxing life with no war, there are many times when he is stuck in a situation where he is the only one experienced enough to fight these battles, to have these victories, and to save everyone's life. Yang is rivaled by Reinhard von Lohengram, who has strong monarchistic values despite being born a commoner. He lost his mother very early on in his life, and his sister filled that role, so it didn't sit well when a nobleman chose his sister to become his mistress, which is basically just his sex toy. This enraged him and fueled his ambition to overthrow the entire aristocracy. Moving on to the side characters, I'm not going to list them simply because there are far too many of them. I would like to list a few because there are some that I preferred, and this is something that everybody's going to feel differently about because there are so many characters that are equally important and equally detailed that everybody's going to come away with a different character that they prefer, and the same goes for me. If I list one, then I have to list another. Next thing you know, this video was 45 minutes long. But if you haven't seen this anime, the only way that I can really put this into perspective is to say, if my life was the story of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, then you would know the name of the person who made my microphone and everyone in his family, and this would be relevant to the story because his children would try and kill me before I finish this video. Yes, it's really that immersive. I would say that at least 75% of the significant characters within the story, as I stated earlier, that is quite a lot, they all have their own history, they have skills, they have flaws, they have goals, they have internal and external struggles, and they all develop along with the plot. Legend of the Galactic Heroes features a level of characterization, both direct and indirect, that is just not present in any other anime that I've seen. Sure, there are many anime out there that feature great characterization, but they don't do it on a level where there are like 50 characters with that much detail. In fact, there are some of the side characters in the story that don't have that big of an impact on the plot that are more detailed than some of the main characters within today's most popular anime. You really have to pay attention to catch some of this indirect characterization, because I remember I watched this with a few friends and I was saying, like, this guy over here, he used to look really upbeat and cheerful, now he just looks really stressed, and we see lately that he's been drinking in increasing amounts over the past few episodes. This guy's having a problem here, and no narrator told you about this. Nobody else came out and said something. Like, he would have people pour more whiskey for him and they would just be shaking their head. They know he's going down the wrong path, but these are things that are shown instead of spoken, and that's important. There's this heavy atmosphere present that just weighs down on all of the characters' shoulders. You can feel that it adds extra stress to their life and causes them to change over time for better or worse. And it's not just this negative, depressing anime series, because there are positives and negatives in everybody's life. But I have to go on to one of what I would consider to be one of the major flaws in this, is that some of the villains feel very one-dimensional. They feel like comic book villains, the corrupt politicians, and also the terrorists that we see later on in the anime. They're very shallow and one-dimensional, and they really stand out when you consider how detailed all of the rest of their universe is, as well as the rest of their characters. These characters really do stand out like a sore thumb, but that's only a minority of the villains present, because this anime does a great job of blurring the line between good and evil, because there aren't that many evil characters here, just the one-dimensional ones. But for the most part, the majority of the anime, I'm talking like 80%, all of the protagonists and antagonists are just doing what they feel to be right, and they all have very detailed personalities, and you could really root for whoever. I remember watching this with my friends, and we all had our different favorites. Legend of the Galactic Heroes features such a large scope that you can never really predict what's going to happen 5 episodes from where you currently are, just because there are so many characters with detailed personalities that have influence on the plot and can change its direction. Characters not only have to fight against their enemies in the opposing faction, but sometimes some within their own as well, whether it be from corruption or rebellion. We see that politics and strategy are held equally important within this anime, as characters not only have to win against their enemies, but also they have to win the hearts and minds of those back home as well. The battles themselves are nothing short of epic, ranging from axe-wielding melee to thousands of ships fighting against a planet-sized fortress, which is similar to the Death Star. And I know it sounds weird to have axes in a show like this, but they actually explained it. Because everyone switches over to laser rifles in the future, or laser guns in the future, they have these devices which emit particles which negate those lasers, and it pretty much makes it so people can't shoot each other and creates more peace that way. But there are some people that still have classic guns, as well as giant axes, and lob people's heads off. As Yang and Reinhard command their respective troops in battle, we all have to consider the personalities of all of their commanders, as we know them very well. There are times when they will follow their instructions to a T, and there are other times when they will kind of do their own thing and screw things up, or occasionally make things better because of it. There are even times when some of the commanders will get really stressed out and kill themselves mid-battle, leaving everyone on their ship stranded. Now, just because this is a large-scale space battle, it doesn't mean that they're all fighting in some giant empty room with nothing to affect them. They have to work around their environment. They have gravity, black holes, solar flares, asteroids, other ships around them, and there are times when one ship will blow up and it'll move off to the side from the explosion, sending it that way, and we'll see from the other ship next to them, from the perspective of those in the deck just looking out, commanding everything and controlling it all, as this giant ship just comes right up to them and smashes them, killing them all. Now, I know I'm stating the self-evident here, but people die in wars. Just saying. I know it's really obvious, but there are some anime that really need to hear this, because there are many times there'll be a war and nobody dies, or 1 or 2 people die. Legend of the Galactic Heroes, in a battle, there are thousands of people dying on each side. There are tons of losses, and many of these people are going to be characters that we learned a lot about. We learned their history, we learned their goals, etc. We learn a lot about these characters, and they get killed off. Everybody is on the chopping block, and no one is safe in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. In addition to being treated with a large cast of detailed characters, we also have a lot of exposition as well. Say, for example, with episode 40, where Julian studies history. He puts in this floppy disk, which just so happens to have a video containing the entire history from our current Earth now, or actually in the 80s, back when the floppy disks were still used, and up until their time in the 36th century. Whenever you're watching any sort of visual storytelling, it's always better to have something shown instead of told, and Legend of the Galactic Heroes actually has a narrator that tells you a lot here, but I really can't fault it for that, because it is actually pretty short when you consider the scope of the story. If they were to take everything that the narrator is saying and explain it to us in a way that is showing it to us through the plot, then it would be about 200 episodes, because there are many times when the narrator goes through certain parts parts of history, but I have to commend it for its the way it handled episode 40, because Julian actually put in that little disc, and it was like it was watching a TV show. So it was basically him watching it and hearing it instead of the narrator speaking directly to us. Having said that, I'm not gonna lie, I mean, they did a great job of putting information everywhere that they could find, because they did have a limited amount of time, I suppose, on this. But about a tenth of the time that I was watching this anime, I was bored, because there's so much information all the time with this, and that's only a tenth of the time. That is a very small amount, but there were just times when I felt that the information I had was very irrelevant. Just being honest here. Like, there's one episode that I remember specifically. We had the Free Planet Alliance. It was showing the contrast between the lives of the soldiers and the politicians. We had Yang Wen-li and his men on the front line, and they were having to live with conservation. They didn't have everything that they needed. And then we had the politicians with the life of luxury back home, who were just sitting around the table complaining about stuff, complaining why the war's not getting done. They have nothing to do with it. They're all the way over there. And there's one guy eating a sandwich. We watched him eat the sandwich, and he's complaining about the type of bread that's used. I understand what they're trying to do with this, but I don't care. I'm not going to give you any spoilers by saying this, but I need to talk about the ending, because there are some anime, whether it be 12 or over 100 episodes, that don't give you a complete ending. They just end it off, and this is not one of those anime. This completes the story, it ties up all the loose ends, and it's something that, it's not a twist, but it's just something that you don't see coming. They do a good job of writing it in a way that you don't expect any of this stuff. That's just the way the anime is, because there are so many characters with so many personalities that the plot can change directions at times, and that's just the way it is. Legend of the Galactic Heroes began in 1988 and finished in 1997. This 9-year production time caused it to change hands 3 times from different anime production companies. This caused a variation of styles with the anime, and it's all relatively consistent, but the animation does increase over time due to the differences in the standards of the different eras of animation. Now, there's also the remaster that I want to talk about, because some of the backgrounds were replaced with much nicer looking images, but there are other times when we find the original background that's still present there, which is basically a 2 or 3 giant brushstroke color gradient that goes across. It's very drab, and it's nothing special in my opinion, but it's not really that big of a deal. It's just something that's noticeable if you know that some of the backgrounds were replaced and some weren't. Now, moving on to the combat, its animation is very hit and miss, more hit than miss, but we had the melee battles with the axes, and people get their heads lopped off, blood flying everywhere. Characters are covered in blood running around with these axes. It's really awesome. We had characters, their organs were coming out, and it was very traumatic scene seeing all of this, because they rarely showed organs, but when they did, they made sure that it had a lot of impact to it within the story. But there's also the space battles with the giant warships. They're going at it. The second half of this anime did a very good job of animating these warship battles, but the first half, it felt like they were almost weightless. They impacted each other as if they had mass, but when they were moving, it felt as if they had no inertia. They would move forward at full speed with these massive thrusters on the back, and there's nothing on the front or any of the other sides, and they would just decide to start, go forward, backwards, left, or right at the drop of a hat. Basically, they could turn sideways at a 90-degree angle on a dime if they wanted to, and that really took me out of the moment a few times, but thankfully it's not that way for the entire anime. Moving on to the animation of the characters themselves, they do a great job of articulating their facial expressions, because everyone does go through a wide range of emotions, and there's also other elements which will take an effect on a character, such as time, because characters do grow a lot within this anime. Characters grow up, characters grow old, as well as just the stress that weighs down on them. You can actually see the difference in the way that they're drawn and the way that they act. You really can. And moving on to the audio, this has a beautiful soundtrack, mostly consisting of classical music, and I love most of the openings in the order of 3, 1, and then 2, and 4 is all the way over there. I couldn't stand 4, and I really regret that I had to finish the show off with the ending of 4. I remember finishing it, and I was like, you know what, this final episode, I'm gonna not watch it, I'm gonna pause it, or I'm gonna mute it for the opening, I'm gonna play one of the other openings instead. That's what I did for the final episode, because I didn't want to end it off that way. but yeah, it was really bad. It was terrible English. As far as the voice acting goes, as of now, I don't think this has been dubbed in any language. I know it's not dubbed in English, and it would be great if it was, because that would make it a much easier watch if we had a nice, high-quality English dub that was translated very well. But having said that, this is subtitle only, which may be a bit hard for some people, considering how dense this is, but the actors do an amazing job of their roles, because these characters go through different emotional ranges. Everybody has these different emotions, and the voice actors did a great job of rising to that occasion. Moving on to my final score of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, I give this a performance level of 9.6 out of 10 with an enjoyment level of a 10. Feel free to round up that 9.6 if you want, either way, but even though I said I was bored at times, even though, you know, those were like a tenth of the time, as I said, which was a minor thing, and I did subtract points for pacing, and also with the villains. Now, the villains, I didn't actually subtract any points from the character side of this, because there were 50 characters, or around 50 characters, that were beautifully characterized, much more than any other anime out there that I've ever seen. So it more than makes up for the few of them that they screwed up on, which was just a few at the end of the day. If you haven't seen Legend of the Galactic Heroes yet, then I highly recommend that you do so. I've provided a list of the order that you should watch them in, which is basically you got your 2 movies and start off at episode 3 there. There's movie 3, haven't seen that one yet, but yeah. Anyways, if you have seen Legend of the Galactic Heroes, then let me know your thoughts about that in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and also share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned next time when I review Berserk.